Today on the show, we're here with Stephen Johnson. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. It's good to be here.
Stephen, for people who might not be familiar with you and your work, can you please tell us who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure, I am a writer at Lifehacker, and I am on this podcast in particular because of a column that I write, a weekly column called The Out of Touch Adult's Guide to Kid Culture, which breaks down things that are going on in youth culture so that people around my age can understand them.
I love it. And you're right. That's exactly the reason I wanted you to come on the show and talk about it. I'm a huge fan of Lifehacker. I've been reading their articles. I was going to say probably since about 2004, 2005, and so many different things I've learned from reading Lifehacker articles. Do you mind, how long have you been writing for Lifehacker?
I have been a staff writer at Lifehacker for about 2 years, and before that, I was a freelancer for a few years as well.
Okay.
So I've
And
been writing
this
for them for a while.
this column that you mentioned, the Out of Touch Guide to Kids Culture, which I absolutely love. How long have you been writing that?
That's a good question, and probably longer than I think. Probably because probably at least 2.5 years, probably,
Okay.
which is kind of crazy in internet time. That's a very long time to be doing the same thing.
Yes. So for people who are not familiar with this series, can you please explain what it is and I want to get into how you write it, but if you could tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. The idea is that there's so much that happens both on the internet and in the larger culture that goes on among young people that older people only see traces of and don't really understand. So I like to kind of get into explaining what things are, and I try to sometimes get into the larger issue of like what things mean and where they come from. So
That's a perfect description. Let's dive into a recent example, if that's okay. So,
sure.
do you mind talking about what you wrote about on one of the recent articles in the series?
I wrote something a few weeks ago about a sort of minor viral thing that was going on TikTok where a bunch of sort of ironic TikTokers had discovered the account of a Chinese manufacturing company that manufactured glycine and posted these uh, very industrial and sort of unintentionally hilarious videos about the benefits of glycine. And the comments from TikTok are the funniest things I've ever read, and just such a great encapsulation of like when the internet is at its best, like when it's at its most creative and most ironic, because all the young people are acting as if they are the greatest fans of glycine that have ever been. And there's hundreds of comments that are like, my favorite comments are the ones that are like, "This is what I've been saying forever. I'm all about the glycine lifestyle." Hilarious.
Okay, I don't think I saw your article including this trend, but I didn't really have a chance to dive into it. What is glycine? I mean, I understand glycine's an amino acid, but what is it about glycine that these people are trying to highlight or draw attention to?
Well, it's not specifically the glycine. See, this is where it gets sort of complicated, and where I where explanations come into play. Is that the the juxtaposition between these incredibly corporate and also incredibly well-meaning and foreign videos with the fan culture of TikTok just creates such an interesting and hilarious juxtaposition of styles. It's hard to explain but you sort of have to see it.
Right. No, that's how it is with a lot of TikTok trends. When you describe it to someone, it sounds either ridiculous or the person doesn't understand why that would be significant at all, which is the reason why this article series is so critical because when you read it and then you understand, okay, this is part of a larger either issue or larger interest point that I didn't know about. That's where I think your article series really shines. If you don't mind my asking, how do you decide what trends you want to write about or what events are significant enough to be included in this article series?
You know, a lot of the ideas that I come up with are just based on scrolling around the internet and checking different sites and things like that. But I find that the best ones that I get, or the most interesting stuff comes from. I have a small network of spies. My son is a teenager, my nieces and nephews, and everybody gets $20 if they give me a tip that I can use, and that's where the most interesting stuff tends to come from.
That's hilarious. So how often do they get the $20? Is this weekly or monthly? What's the
You know, I probably give about $20 a week on average. Probably about
okay.
one of the things I cover is comes from that source.
Okay.
And it's
And
interesting because some of the things that they're because since I'm actually writing for people who are older, some of the things that younger people are into, I know they're actually into, but I know they also wouldn't be interesting to somebody who was older. So I have to kind of reject the ones that I'm like, yeah, I see what you're saying, but no.
that's fascinating. Are there certain topics where you know automatically older people are going to be fascinated or have no clue? And I think specifically of an example of every time you put about what slang is now and whether it's riz or something else and it's a word and I've heard that word but I don't understand what it means or what the context is that people are using it. Not riz, I understand riz, but like are there certain things like that that people definitely need to be told about?
Well, yeah, I think slang is a really interesting topic to everybody who isn't involved in the slang. I just think it's funny because I always point out in my column like this is what the slang word means, but don't use it.
Right.
Like if you need me to tell you what a slang word means, you cannot use that word. It will not work out for you. Uh, Another thing that I found really interesting in writing this column is that if you look up like warnings about different social media sites like TikTok or YouTube or whatever, pretty much weekly there is some organization of police or teachers that are warning about some dangerous trend, some dangerous challenge on TikTok.
Hmm.
But in writing this column, I looked into a lot of them and I haven't found one that was actually really based on something people were doing on TikTok.
Interesting.
It's like yeah, so there's this strange kind of thing that I guess older people have always done toward younger people where certain older people look at the younger generation and they see something that's scary so they make up kind of stories about the wild things that young people are doing, but the stories in this case at least aren't true and you can check it, unlike in the past where it was just a rumor that kids were doing these, like I don't know, smoking banana peels to get high or whatever it was that people used
Right.
to. So it's kind of interesting to be able to like trace it back to the source of things, like
What I like.
there's a big one like a maybe a year ago or so where one day in June or something it was supposed, or I guess it wasn't June, but one day in like October it was supposed to be Slap a Teacher Day, and there were
Right.
all these warnings all over the place, and I was like, wow, Slap a Teacher Day, that's quite something. Let me look into this, and I scoured TikTok to find any child of any age who posted a single video that was like this day slap a teacher, we're going to slap all the teachers. Couldn't find a single one.
So
Found
I
lots
think
of
that's a
teachers saying it's slap a teacher day, everybody be really worried, but no kids that were actually doing it. So I find that interesting.
That's a great example, and I don't remember if it was specifically Slap a Teacher Day or another trend like that that people were saying was an event, but I understand that there are certain marketing companies who were hired by other large corporate tech companies to say, look at how dangerous TikTok is, look at these trends that are happening. And when you actually investigate them, right? That's what we always say. Do your research, look into it. Is that really a thing or are we just assuming that that's a thing? But I
No,
love
that's totally true. I mean, there was a lawsuit about it, and it's sort of public knowledge. I guess I won't talk about which social media company it was
we
that
can. I mean, it's fine. I
it
don't we
was
can talk
Facebook.
about anything.
It was Facebook.
Right.
They part of their marketing strategy, at least used to be, seeding these kinds of stories, and it worked really well apparently because you'd see them all the time, and it was
Yes.
always a TikTok challenge. There's never a Facebook challenge, always a
Yes.
TikTok challenge. So
And but on the flip side of that, one of the things that I really love is so many times the things that are happening are so innocent. And you highlighted recently the Utah fit check, which is just, very silly. You wear some baggy jeans, do a little spin move in the air, and that's it. And sometimes there's silly dances, and that's fine too. But so many of the things are just silly and just innocent, and that's totally fine. How often do you see that versus the things that people are, oh, I should be so worried about?
You know, 90% is it's mostly innocent because they're kids, and we forget because they're when they get a little older, they're teenagers, and but they're. I think that the current generation of young people now are sort of more wholesome and less jaded than say I was at that age. And it's really encouraging. I mean, they seem like really thoughtful, polite, like a very thoughtful, polite generation in a way that my generation wasn't. I know a lot of people are gonna be like, "That's not true." But one of the things I try to do with my column is I try to never make the things that I write about young people are doing this stupid thing and aren't they stupid in doing this thing, because that just seems like the worst, least interesting way to think about young people. If I ever do that, like some things are stupid, but I try to always point out, think of the stupid things you did.
Yes. Yes,
Like
absolutely.
it's just part of growing up is being foolish and making mistakes, things like that. So I just try to never come down or be negative. And I'm always amazed. I'll read the comments, and sometimes the commenters are like these kids today, get off my lawn, and I'm like, that's exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to say,
Right,
kids,
right.
come on my lawn. I want you on the. That sounds wrong, and I don't mean that.
No, but it's a refreshing take, and I think about the things that were popular when I was in high school, and I remember there was a movie, and I can't remember what the movie was, but in the movie, the kids would, as a dare, like lay down in traffic and have cars drive over them. I can't remember what the heck the movie was,
Oh, I do
and it was
remember that
sort of
movie.
this like kids are imitating this in real life, and I went to high school way before social media. And I think, okay, so we were capable of following things that we saw in pop culture and making bad decisions based off that. These kids have access to way more than we ever did, but yet they're doing just silly, harmless things. Not all the time, but much of the
Usually,
time
yeah,
it
there are
is.
some, yeah, because there are some things like there was the popular trending genre of videos of like prank videos that I guess are still done today. And those can be kind of dangerous because you're trying to get like reactions from people on the street. And I get it that you're trying to get something interesting on video to show people, but that can be dangerous. And this is the one that I was totally on the fence about. It's kind of one of my favorites, but also something I recognize that children and adults, no one should do this. But about a year and a half ago, there was something called the Kool-Aid Challenge, which
Yeah,
actually I
right.
was able to find some examples of, which is just saying, "Oh yeah," like the Kool-Aid Man, and then trying to run through a fence. And I'm like, "Yeah, it's dangerous. You shouldn't do it, but it's so awesome. You should."
I think a lot of times, compared to like doing drugs or doing other inappropriate things, is that the worst thing you could be doing? I kind of want to take it with a grain of salt. You mentioned about your favorites, and I would love if you can share what is either your favorite topic that you've written about or video series that you've had an opportunity to dig into more, whatever you feel comfortable to talk about.
Oh man, that's interesting. I was looking over old columns the other day, and just that I'd written like a year ago to like last month. And there is so much that I've written about and researched that I completely was like, oh, yeah, that was a thing for about 5 minutes. And it's like just all these things are so instantly forgotten that, like, I just find that fascinating how, like, especially among younger people, that something can be the most important thing in the entire world one day. And then the next day, it's like, I don't even remember that thing anymore. Or, oh, yeah, that thing, I guess, So,
I'm glad you said that. In thinking about and preparing for this interview, I was going back and looking at some of your columns, and even the ones that I read a month or two ago, oh man, I completely forgot about that trend or that thing. And it's funny because just like you said, it was so important that like we immediately shared it or said, "Can we make a video like that?" Or "What does this mean?" But then how quickly we move on to something else instead.
right. The kind of themes that that reoccur though are like there's a lot of things that younger people do where they are very closely examining their friendships and thinking about them and sharing about the relationships they have with other people. And you get to a certain age and you're like, I don't care about my friends. Like I don't. But these kids are like way because I guess because it's new to them, so they're figuring it out. And it's so easy when you become jaded and old to forget all those things, to forget like what that felt like and what that was like. So I find it like a great part of my job is being able to constantly go, oh yeah, like there's a nostalgic sense for the things that I did when I was young. So it's cool to keep in touch with that and to try and hold on to it a little bit or at least remember it fondly.
I love that. Has it happened where you've wanted to write about or write your article series for the week, and then after you hit send or publish or whatever, that's when you find out about a trend either has been existing and just nobody told you, or you didn't catch on that that was a big enough thing to write about?
That happens to me all the time and it makes me crazy because like I'll hear about something, I'll be like, oh wow, this is great. And then I'll look into it and it's like, oh, this happened 3 months ago. And I'm like, well, it's my job to follow this stuff, and yet I still miss a lot of it. Or this one makes me even more crazy when I'll mention something like that to my son. He's like, or I'll mention something I'm writing about to my son, and he'll go, "Oh yeah, I was into that like a couple months ago." I was like, "Why didn't you tell me then? I would be like the first person to write about it." Like, he's like, "I don't know, I didn't think you care." And I was like,
That could have been his $20 for the week or whatever.
It's true. He could have made some dough off it, but
Are there people who you read or watch or follow where you specifically know that they talk about similar cultural topics that are relevant at that moment?
there's a I there's a website called Know Your Meme, which is
Oh,
really up to date on things. So I check them out, and there's a site called the Daily Dot, which sometimes has interesting stuff. And sometimes I'll check out Reddit, some different subreddits and stuff. But it's kind of an organic thing. Like I don't have a specific process. Like here's where I get my stuff. I just kind of it's free form enough that I don't have to do that. Although I gotta say, some weeks it's weird because some weeks nothing is happening, and I'm just like, oh man, like literally nothing is happening in the world of youth culture. I don't know what kids are doing this week that they're not doing anything. But
I one topic that I would love for you to write about, and maybe you did, and I just haven't seen it, is sort of some of the celebrity, I'll say beefs or celebrity disagreements that come out in a variety of ways. Have you ever written about that, or did you ever
I
think
did. I
about that?
wrote about I wrote about Cardi B and Megan the Stallion had a beef. Maybe I think I might be getting the people wrong, but that is something that's really interesting. I do try to like I had a thing that I was doing regularly for a while, which was called Celebrities You've Never Heard of,
Oh,
where because there's all these people that are super famous to people of a certain
yes,
age that people over a certain age just have never heard of, like Mr. Beast rather. This
Mr.
would be sounding
Beast. Yeah,
100
yeah.
years old. Mr. Beast, a huge celebrity, unless you're over like I don't know 35, and then you're like Mr. What? Like what are you talking about? I don't know who that is.
Right, right. I was thinking specifically because in the past couple of weeks, there's been some disagreements, or I'll say songs criticizing other rappers between Kendrick Lamar and Drake and some other people, which I don't follow and I don't pretend to know all of why they're having this. But I would love to see if you did an article about that to kind of get a really good recap on what's going on because it is very hard to follow sometimes.
I'm gonna have to send you $20 because that's a really good idea. That really is. I had heard about that. Like I heard a little about Kendrick Lamar writing a Drake diss track, and I actually talked to my kid about it, who's a hip hop guy, and I can't like I'm so far removed from the meaning of hip hop to younger people
Mm,
that I can't really get a grasp on why it is that Drake is so disliked. And because I listen to it and it's like, yeah, I like it. It's good. And my kid's like, it's so corny, it's so and I'm just like, and he's like, here, listen to this, and I'm like, well, it sounds about the same to me, but.
one of the elements of it, which I please don't quote me on, but I understand to be that Drake's response was written by AI, which I think adds a layer to it. I don't know if
What?
that's verified or if he admitted it or he was accused of it, but these are the kinds of things where I look for your article series to help me clear up and understand.
I am seriously going to look into this, and I'll probably include it next week. So thank you for the tip.
Oh, absolutely. This
Because
has been
that is
great.
actually really fascinating. Like, because rap beefs have been around forever, but
Yes.
they didn't used to accuse people of using AI. Like
Yes.
Biggie didn't say that Tupac was using AI.
Right. On the plus side, there's this back and forth that we have to follow through social media. And this one put it on their Instagram story, but it is alluding to this song and this happened. Less people die on the con. I would say that's a pro. Less people are getting hurt physically, so maybe that's better. But times have changed and it's different now, just like
Yeah.
you were saying.
Yep. That's sort of like the subtitle of my column would be "Times have changed. It's different now." But in a
Right.
way, it is different. But in another way, like the themes are the same. Like kids are just still kids, the same way you were when you were a kid, and I was when I was a kid. So
That's a great point.
yeah.
Steve, it's been fantastic talking with you. Thank you so much for your time. Can you tell us what can we look forward to you creating in the near future and where can we continue to follow your journey online?
Oh man, if you go to lifehacker.com, you'll probably see something that I've written. I write both this column and a column called What People Are Getting Wrong This Week, which is just I take a piece of misinformation that's popular that week and I tell people what they got wrong. And I also write general pop culture news. I write about streaming, and I occasionally write more esoteric articles just to kind of provide a contrast to Lifehacker's usual practical advice with advice that's not practical at all.
I will say also, I appreciate your series on sort of what to watch and what to stream or go see in the movie theater, because there is just so much content out there. And there's nothing worse than hearing, oh, you need to watch this show. And you ask, oh, is it great? Well, no, it doesn't get great until about six, 6 or 8 episodes in. And you think, okay, well, maybe I don't want to dedicate, 4 or 8 hours into a show just to hope that it gets good. So I
Right.
also appreciate those recommendations.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It was so great talking to you.
Steve, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
No worries. I can't wait to hear it.
Is there anything that you never want to write about that you're just absolutely like, oh, this topic is terrible and it's just 100% not for me?
I don't like writing about Donald Trump.
Well, there's plenty written about him already, so I
Exactly.
understand
People are
that.
already doing it, and I don't. I try. I'm not a very controversial writer. Like I don't like writing about hot button issues and like real controversial things, just because it's not in my nature to kind of take a very strong position and stick. I'm really a centrist kind of person. So
I give you a lot of credit because I think it's hard to stay away from people's political opinions because everyone has different thoughts about what they think is right or wrong. But you're just saying, here's the facts, right? Here's what you need to know. Here's what you didn't know, but we'll give you the context so that you are in the know. And I think that's the best way to do it.
thanks so much. I always try to do that. I always try. It's difficult, but I do try to not. I just my thing if I have a thing is to just try to be empathetic toward the things that I write about and try to see it from the point of view
Right.
of the other person that I'm writing about or other
That's
people.
awesome.